This is the Business Storytelling Show with Christoph Trappe. Name a top 20 storytelling podcast and a top 5% podcast globally, Christoph chats with thought leaders and experts to share tips and tricks that can help you tell your company's stories better to drive business results. Available wherever you listen to podcasts, live streamed on major social media channels, and part of the DB&A television network, available on most U.S. television sets and streaming on Roku and Amazon Fire. Here's Christoph with today's episode. Let's go.
Episode 598, my friends. Can you believe it? 600 on deck before we know it. Really happy to see everyone. Today we want to talk about a new concept that I don't know much about other than how to ask about it. So RJ Licata, he's the Senior Director of Marketing at Terakeet. He will kind of fill us in. What is reception marketing? How do we do it to build trust? And of course, we had Melanie DeZiesel, probably butchered that last name. My apologies, Melanie, on the show talking about building trust. So we all agree, right, that is super important to build trust with your consumers. So let's get RJ on the show here, find out what is reception marketing. But first of all, what does Terakeet do? So let's get it started. RJ, nice to see you.
You too, Christoph. Thanks for having me.
And you know what? Editorial comment here. It looks like all our streams are working great. So it's always nice to see that technology for change is on my side. Thank you for bringing the good news, I guess. Tell us, Terakeet, what do you do? And then after that, let's dive into reception marketing.
Sure. So Terakeet is a connections company. We specialize in helping Fortune 500 brands to build meaningful relationships with their audience. And we do that by providing helpful and relevant information and content for them that builds trust with their customers, reduces customer acquisition costs, and increases the bottom line revenue for the brands.
And building trust certainly is more and more important, especially with just so much happening out there. I mean, the attention economy, unbelievable, right? I mean, the other day I was talking about how, yeah, I care about your product, but you know what your product is currently competing with? Me wanting to watch this Yankee matinee. That's why I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, and that's where reception marketing really comes into play, because you're constantly fighting with devices as a marketer, and consumer empowerment is higher than it's ever been, and so reception marketing is the solution that we found to really tapping into that audience and connecting with them.
Very interesting. I'm sure everybody wants to know about that. So kind of give us a high level definition. And we love definitions here on the Business Storytelling Show. What is reception marketing? How do we think about it?
Sure. So we look at it as a consumer first approach to marketing that provides the consumer with the information that they want or need when they want it or need it.
Well, that makes sense in theory, but how does that look in practice? So like if I, or how do I know as a marketer when people want or need information?
Yeah. So the most effective way, I think, to fully understand how we understand reception marketing to be effective is to kind of take a little bit of a marketing history lesson, where we go back to about 100 years ago in the 1920s, when paid advertising and radio commercials really kind of broke onto the scene. And it started with consumer packaged goods, companies like Procter & Gamble, trying to develop and tap into the soap opera function and content that was being provided for that audience. And as it evolved and came onto television and became more mainstream and really entered every home in America, it started to hit a peak in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the Mad Men era, and commercials and paid advertising were the thing. They were the way for brands to connect with customers. The problem happened or came to light really in the late 20th century, when Seth Godin coined the phrase permission marketing, and he juxtaposed that against the paid channel and the paid mechanism, which he called interruption marketing. And nobody wants to interrupt their consumers. Nobody wants to feel like they're a burden to their audience. So interruption marketing suddenly took on this light of less than ideal. And it was because people weren't tuning in for the commercial. They were tuning in for the content, and their day was interrupted, or their entertainment was interrupted by the paid advertisement. And so when Godin introduced permission marketing, he made it very attractive for brands. It was when email marketing was just coming onto the scene, and brands had a new way to connect with consumers, where the consumer was participating a bit, and they were raising their hand and saying, yes, I want to hear from you. Yes, I want more information. And it allowed brands to continue to market to them without the sense of feeling as if they were interrupting. Over the last 20 years, 25 years, that has changed again. And it really started when the smartphone became a constant, when everyone had one in their pocket, and there was a tipping point of it being a mainstream, commonplace device that the consumers were all using. Now they are used to having it in their pocket. They can search in real time to find information that they want when they're in the store, if need be. And so this empowerment that the consumer has put them in a place where they felt like where they feel and where they're used to having everyone, where they have the power in their hands. And in order for marketers to connect with consumers now, they need to be tuned in to being there when the consumer wants them. And so that's where reception marketing comes in. And that's how we specialize. We identify through behavior research where the needs are, where the interests are, leveraging organic search data and behavioral data. We identify where the consumer is in need of support from the brand, and the brand can then be there in advance of a purchase to build a relationship early on with the consumer, which builds trust, which allows the consumer to feel like the brand is there for them even before there's been a transaction.
You know, what's interesting to me, all those things you mentioned, I have had positive experiences with and negative experiences. I've actually, I've bought a whole house generator of a TV commercial, right? But they didn't know that I needed it. I mean, there's no way they knew. Everybody got to see the same commercial, right? So it's kind of like, I mean, they're just guessing, quite frankly. But then sometimes in my Facebook feed, and I try to stay off of Facebook, honestly, but you know, I see, oh, another Yankees hat. Oh, another this, another that. And I'll buy, right? Like to the dismay of my wife, I'll buy it because I want it. They hit me at the right time. Oh, $15 off. Great. I can buy the same hat that looks exactly like the 8 other hats I have today already. So how do you, and of course in B2B, it's similar too, right? I mean, you just kind of keep getting in front of me at the right times. But how do you know? Is this only on digital channels? Is it TV? Is it everywhere? Where can we expect that that personalized experience? And when I just said TV, I mean, we watch YouTube TV now, and I bet you I watch more YouTube TV on my iPad than I watch on the actual TV.
Yeah, and so like it's all digital, and with things like YouTube and connected TV, the brands have a little bit more control over who sees what commercial, what ad, and they're able to apply it more specifically to a targeted audience. But just because you're a Yankees fan doesn't mean that you want or are ready or interested in buying another Yankees cap. And I think when you start talking about the volume of people that they're getting this information in front of, the law of averages says that somebody's going to buy. But what we found is that paid in particular is the most inefficient channel there is right now for marketing. There's a lot of poor inventory. There's a lot of opaqueness in how that inventory is being used, where the ads are showing up, who's clicking on them. The cost per click is varied. There's fraud. There's fat finger accidental clicks. There's ad blockers, and there's a reduced attention span in general from folks who are have learned how to tune out ads. there's a phenomenon called the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, which basically says that when you realize something exists, you tend to see it more. And it's not because it happens more frequently, it's because you're tuned into it. And the idea of reception marketing is that consumers, as they're navigating through their journey, they're sending out signals and they're operating on a specific frequency. And that frequency is what they're tuned into and what they're aware of. When you buy a certain type of car, you tend to see them all over the road and you never noticed them before. There aren't more of that type of car. It's just that that's the frequency that your brain is operating on. And so anytime that there's a television commercial or traditional type interruption marketing, sure, there will be some people who buy the generator, as you mentioned, Christoph, but they also are not tapping into the people who are operating on the frequency of a certain product, a certain concept, a certain challenge or problem that they're facing. And brands who can tap into that frequency have a better chance of connecting with more people and having more efficient and effective marketing spend that works, and there's less waste.
Somebody earlier today asked me, what's your favorite content strategy? And I said, the one that works.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the least efficient strategy currently is paid. And of course, I mean, we know there's a whole industry and a whole, people that work in that in their marketing career. That's what they do, right? Mm-hmm. They run paid campaigns. So let's assume that is the least efficient right now. What's the most efficient?
So in order to execute reception marketing, we use a framework or a strategy called owned asset optimization. And it starts with the materials, with the marketing materials and assets that the company owns and has full control of over, both technically and logistically, and creatively. So what that means is that you can create a piece of content, optimize it for a certain need or a certain use case that your audience might have, and you can get it to them through whatever channels are necessary to attract them to the content that they're already on the lookout for. That's the thing. They're looking for it. And so it's most effective because they're seeking it out. And the primary channel for that is organic search, but owned asset optimization, or OAO, does not have to be channel specific. It's channel agnostic, but it focuses on controlling the assets that you have the most control over, the ones that you own, which are your website, blog content that you can publish on your website, and anything that you have direct creative and technical control over.
I'm so glad to hear it. The website, blog articles. I mean, certainly I've made a living in both of those. But a lot of companies, RJ, would you not agree? They kind of, I don't know what the right term is, but they're not necessarily putting as much effort into those two things as they probably should. Is that just my imagination, or would you agree with that?
No, that's totally true, especially in the market that we work in. So the bigger the brand, it seems, the less attention they tend to give on their owned assets from the jump. It's easy for them to spend a lot of money in the paid channels. They have big budgets, make a big splash. There's brand equity that comes with paid. So paid and interruption marketing is not a lost cause, but it's not as effective or as efficient as managing the owned assets that you have. And so what we found is oftentimes the larger the brand, the more domain authority they have, the more power comes from their website, because it's got a lot of trust inherently. It's been around for a long time. In most cases, people are naturally wanting to link to them. So it all builds this trust and authority within Google, within the search engines, in the marketplace. But where the brands tend to miss is the way that they produce content as a performance mechanism, rather than relying or allowing and sacrificing really their organic search market share to publishers and affiliates. So if you think about like the NerdWallets of the world, they produce a bunch of content, they rank very well, and they'll show up in a number of searches on Google. And if you're, say, Bank of America, you might have a credit card that is referenced on NerdWallet, and you're getting business from NerdWallet ranking high and directing traffic to your website. But you're also paying a premium, an affiliate fee to NerdWallet for referring that traffic to you. And these brands have such strength, authority, resources that a carefully crafted content strategy that adopts owned asset optimization, leads with the owned asset first, under the concept of reception marketing, they can without as much trouble as they think, take over a lot of that search market share from the publishers and the affiliates that they've really just been sacrificing it to for a long time.
It's so interesting. I was very surprised when you said the bigger the brand, the less they pay attention to that. That's, I mean, I get it. They got more money, but they also have more money to run a better content strategy. So why don't they? That's very strange. So when you mentioned owned asset optimization, I actually think the more I listen to you talk about that, it's kind of like the next level up of what I've been talking about for years, which is create once, publish everywhere. But what create once, publish everywhere doesn't address is what owned asset optimization addresses, right? How do you optimize everything you have wherever you can reach people? I mean, am I on the wrong track here, or would you agree?
No, that's what it is. So we use a framework that we call the Mach 6. It stands for the Marketing Asset Control Hierarchy, and there's 6 layers to it. And it starts with there's 3 core buckets, and within that there's 6 total layers. And the 3 buckets are the owned section, which includes the foundational elements of your brand. So things like personas that you're targeting, what your brand stands for, your mission, purpose, values, a lot of the items that tend to maybe live below the surface of the water. And then on the ground level, you've got your website. And that is like where all of the brand foundational materials, the owned assets, kind of break through and show their face most prominently. Then on the next tier you have, which is still in the owned bucket, you have things like blog content, corporate communications, pillar posts, and content on your website, any tools or downloads that a brand might have depending on their business. Again, still owned, but slightly removed from the core function of your root domain. Once you get beyond that, then you start getting into areas where you don't have full control. This is the managed tier. And so there's 2 levels there, things like social media or email marketing or even Wikipedia, where you can have some degree of control, but not full control. If you wanted to post something on social media on, say, Facebook, you could post what you wanted. But if suddenly Mark Zuckerberg decided that he had certain formatting parameters that you had to abide by, you're kind of stuck with what he wants to do. And so as you get further up the Mach 6, you start to sacrifice degrees of control over the assets and the channel distribution that you can execute. And then the final bucket is the leveraged tier. So it's owned, managed, and then leveraged. Leveraged are areas where brands can influence it with a solid core of owned assets and consistent messaging, but they can't have any direct control over it. That includes things like influencers, news channels, just the general news, and other third-party items where word of mouth, where they can influence what they want people to talk about, but ultimately it's up to those parties to really articulate it.
If you guys didn't hear that, RJ said, don't control influencers, just work with them and try to influence them. That's how you get the best. You know, I see influencers who are totally off brand sometimes, and I can tell somebody somewhere scripted that for them, and it's like the worst video they have, and it doesn't do any good for anybody. But I do see the problem that a lot of brands don't necessarily maximize their own content assets. I mean, I see that all the time. Now, let's talk about building trust a little bit, though. So let's say I got a good inventory of my own content assets and everything, and now I want to earn trust and build trust, and most importantly, maybe keep trust with my audience. How do you do that? Is it just the words? Is it how you present it? What tips can you offer when it comes to that?
Yeah, I think it's it's an overused word, but I think being authentic and leading with service. So a couple of things that I think bring some context to this is this experience continuum. So a mentor of mine, Dave Menifee, offered this up, and it starts. Too much marketing leads with the transaction first. It's after they want to purchase. And if there's not an ROI in a direct transaction, it's kind of considered to be maybe not as effective as it could be. So it starts with a transaction. The next step on that continuum is engagement. They get the consumer to maybe engage a little bit more with the brand, to commit a little bit more. And then finally, the last stage there is a relationship. And that's where the consumer has as much invested in the relationship as the brand does, and vice versa. With the way that we approach OAO and reception marketing, we're kind of turning that on its head a bit. And we're leading with, what can we do for you? How can we provide service for you? And I mean, on behalf of the brands that we work with, so that their consumer feels like they're helped, protected, informed, someone's looking out for them without having to make a purchase first. And so the way that I phrase it is consumer service. Everyone talks about customer service, but what about the consumer who hasn't yet purchased from you? These are the people who are in your target audience or your total addressable market, but they're not someone who's necessarily bought from you yet. What can you provide to them in the form of service, information, guidance, support before you ask for them to make a commitment financially to invest in your brand? And so if you can build that relationship, trust inherently comes with it.
Very interesting. And I think just like, even talking about the things people care about, I mean, I can't let it go, honestly, like this whole connection to cope, which is what I talk about all the time. And I can see myself even in conversation now moving forward, RJ, go, yeah, you want to run the cope model, no doubt, but you also want to, optimize that with OAO. And then people will say, what the heck is OAO, right? I would think some people, and
Yes.
I'll say own asset optimization. And that's maybe that's even more important than publishing everywhere, but to figure out how to do that. So it's very interesting how to get that in front of the right people. But to build the trust, to actually get going, and also I know a lot of companies struggle with internal workflows, and I've seen the whole gamut, RJ, from over approving everything to under approving everything.
Yeah.
How does a team get started with reception marketing? What are the steps? How do you get it off the ground floor running?
It can be challenging, especially when with the companies that we work with, because they're so large and disparate. Even within marketing, there's so many sub-departments and operational silos. When you throw on things like industry guidelines and rules and restrictions as far as what can be published and how, I think of like the pharmaceutical industry and the limitations that they have over how you can position brands and drugs and medicine. So there's a lot of challenges when it comes to operationalizing this. One of the things that Terakeet has gotten really good at and figured out is to bring multiple groups within the organization together to the table to achieve buy-in, to get them to recognize that there's value and opportunity for them from the work that we're doing, and that we position ourselves as a partner and as someone who can provide the support, and we're not out to take anyone's job or to eliminate any positions or to we want to make those groups shine. And so I think that when you get that partnership feel, it helps. And whether it's with us or just internally, any company can execute that, but it starts by getting the right people at the table and saying, like, this is the approach we're going to take, and this is why it's important, and this is the buy-in that's required from each group in order to make it consistent. Because what you can't do is really go halfway with it. It makes it very challenging if one sub department is all in and another is not fully bought into the concept.
I think the whole debate on taking jobs is, I don't want to say it's overblown. I mean, it certainly happens, but I think about this whole AI debate currently going on, and you know what? AI will not take my job anytime soon. Maybe down when I'm retired, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying, I use AI daily, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually enhancing my job. It's making me better at my job. It's helping me brainstorm way easier. So I would just encourage everyone who has that fear every time you bring in any new workflows, any new software, anything, to like, that shouldn't be your go-to to think about the first thing. Will this replace my job? Because the reality is, if there is something that will replace your job, it'll replace it anyways, whether
Right.
you fight it or not. But most of these technologies, most of these things, they can help us create content better, get in front of people better. The last 60 seconds or so here, RJ, really appreciate you coming on the show. Kind of tell us, how do people work with Terakeet? How do they get started? How does that process work? And thank you for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you. So anyone who's interested in learning more about OAO, owned asset optimization, and reception marketing can visit terakeet.com. And we have a lot of information and content there. There's also a form if they're interested in speaking with sales to fill out that form, and someone will be in contact with you shortly. And then anyone who's interested in connecting with me personally, I'm on LinkedIn. RJ Licata is my name.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review our show on your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to share this episode with your networks. We appreciate you. Until next time, let the best stories win.